Hello there, welcome to the audio SSLC series of learning. Today we are going to be learning English second language, Unit 1. Let's learn about the chapter A Hero. This is a prose, meaning it's a story written in an ordinary format, a writing format, unlike a poem. So here we refer first to the anecdote that is narrated by a person. Then we are going to answer the question that is asked after the anecdote. Now, what is an anecdote? Anecdote is a short, interesting story about a real person or an incident. Here, the anecdote says that the author was teaching his 8-year-old son, whose name was Siddhartha, and he was teaching him about living and non-living things. So after that, the author asks his son to tell him 5 important features of the living things. So the son promptly replies saying that living things breathe, they feel, they move, they grow old, and eventually living things die. But his father was not satisfied with only these answers. He wanted him to give one more important feature of living thing. But it seemed like the son couldn't remember. So he just says, forget. And this made the author smile. Now the question is, what made the author smile? Is it because of his son's ignorance or the forgetfulness in general? Or was it his ready wit? We need to choose the most appropriate answer here. Here in the anecdote, it says that his son couldn't remember any more characteristic of living things. So it was natural for him to say forget. But the thing is, living things do forget many times. So that could have been another feature too, which made his father smile, especially about his son's cute ignorance. Now let's come to the story and let's know as to how a child became a hero overnight. Here it says, Swami's life was going on as usual, and suddenly there were some events that took place that made his life kind of go awry, which means it made his life kind of topsy-turvy. Father was looking over the newspaper and he was sitting and reading under the hall lamp, and he just happened to go through an interesting piece of news. So he started to read it. Then he said, news has been received about the bravery of a village lad who, while returning home by the jungle path, came face to face with a tiger. Then the news that he was reading, its paragraph described how the boy fought with the tiger and how he climbed up the tree. Here it says his flight up the tree means he climbed up the tree and he stayed there for half a day until some people who were coming that way saw this and they eventually killed the tiger. So after reading this piece of news, father looked at Swami fixedly in the sense that he stared at his son and he asked him, what do you say to that? Now, father was expecting his son to be inspired and be as courageous as the boy in the news story. But Swami had a different opinion. He said, I think he must have been a very strong and grown-up person, not a boy at all. How could a boy fight a tiger? Swami thought he was very strong and he was a grown-up individual. He was not a boy. And that's the reason he could fight off the tiger. Or else how could, if he were to be a small boy, it was impossible for him to fight the tiger. But father sneered at his answer. Here sneered means to speak in a very unkind way. Father was not impressed by what Swami said because he was expecting his son to be inspired by this story. But this guy here, he was kind of up against his father. So father said, you think you're wiser than the newspaper? So now the father says, no, please don't act too smart. You are no way wiser than what the newspaper says. Father was of the opinion that even if a man has the strength like that of an elephant, but if he is a coward, then he still cannot fight the challenges. But if someone has the strength of just a straw, which means if someone has very weak strength, but if he has the courage, that is, if he has the daringness to face the challenges, then he can do anything, because courage is everything. It's more important than either the strength or the age. They're not so important as much as courage is. But Swami disputed the theory. That means Swami did not agree to what father said. He said, how can it be, father? Suppose I have all the courage, what could I do if a tiger should attack me? So he says that if he doesn't have the strength, and just if he has the courage, still he needs strength to attack and fight off the tiger. How can he do that with only courage? But now his father was up to something to prove a point that courage was indeed very important. So he tells his son to just leave aside strength for now. He just needs his son to prove that he has courage. So the father asks him if he can sleep alone that night in his office room. Now, this was a frightful proposition for Swami. Frightful proposition meaning this was a really scary offer that father had put him under. Because Swami was always sleeping next to his granny in the passage, and if there was any change in this sort of setup, that made Swami tremble and be awake all night. Trembling is shaking. He could just not go to sleep without his granny. So he thought his father was only joking with him. So he was mumbling weakly, yes. But he tried to change the subject to distract his father away from what he had offered, from what he had challenged his son. So he kind of changes the topic. Now he's very loud and with great deal of excitement and enthusiasm. He says to his father, we are going to admit even elders in our cricket club hereafter. We are buying brand new bats and balls. Our captain has asked me to tell you. He thinks his father will be really excited hearing about the news that even he could go and join his son's school's cricket club, and they all get to buy brand new bats and balls, and he gets to play with all of them. And that's what their school captain had asked him to tell him. But father didn't give in to all his distractions. We'll see about that later, he said, and saying that he just cut his words. He was bent upon thinking about the challenge that he had offered. He still said, you must sleep alone hereafter. Now Swami realized that he couldn't control anything. He couldn't distract his father. His father was just bent upon that one thing that he was telling Swami about. The Swami thought, okay, now it was a challenge before, but now it's become a command which I must obey to. Because he knew how his father was. He had great tenacity. That means he had great determination in getting things done. Then Swami said, okay, from the first of next month, I'll sleep alone, father. So this boy just couldn't dare to sleep alone. So maybe he wanted to mentally prepare himself, or more accurately, he just wanted to forego this moment somehow without agreeing to his father. So he says, okay, from the first of next month, I'll sleep alone. He wanted to delay his challenge somehow in the hope that his father would forget all about it and things would get back to normal. But again, speaking of his father's tenacity, his father said, no, you must do it now. It is disgraceful sleeping beside granny or mother like a baby. Father had seen him always sleeping either by the side of his grandmother or mother. And according to his father, since Swami was in the second form, he should stop behaving like a baby, sleeping beside his mother and grandmother, and he should just make a switch to being a grown-up boy. Now, second form means students who are in the secondary school. So their age is anywhere between 12 to 13 years. So, and he was a pretty big boy according to his dad. And so the father said he just didn't like the way this boy was being brought up. And saying this, he looked at his mother. She was rocking the cradle, putting her other baby to sleep. And she found his staring at her so irritating that she said, "Why do you look at me while you say it?" She never wanted to admit that it was her who was spoiling her son. So she was really irritated, and she said that she hardly knew anything about the boy. She was busy doing her own thing, and she had no hand whatsoever in spoiling this boy. But of course, she said that if it meant that his mother was spoiling him, then he should tell his mother about it, and he should stop looking at his wife like that. And so she was so irritated, and she just turned away after saying this. And coming back to discussing about the second form, in the British times, that is the British system of education, being in second form was equivalent to studying the seventh standard. Now, Swami's father was sitting gloomily, and he was staring at the newspaper that was on his lap. Gloomily means having lost all hope. So his father was sitting gloomily, means that the father had lost all hopes to see any improvement in his son. Now Swami gets up slowly and silently, and he tiptoes to his bed in the passage. Tiptoed means he walked very quietly on the tips of his toes because he didn't want to make a noise and get his father's attention. He just wanted to go to his bed in the passage and just go to sleep. But his grandmother was still awake, and she was sitting in her bed, and she said to him, "Boy, are you already feeling sleepy? Don't you want to hear a story?" She was as natural as she could get because she didn't know about what had happened, so it was all natural for her to talk so loudly and so casually. But Swami made wild gesticulations so that he could silence his granny. Now, gesticulations means to make movements with the hands and the arms as if to say something without actually using the words so that the other person doesn't hear the words. So when he was gesticulating to his granny, she never bothered to understand, and she just kept on talking casually. So Swami just threw himself on the bed, and just he pulled up the blanket and he covered his face. Now Granny started to say again, "Don't cover your face. Are you really very sleepy?" She went on and on, talking casually. And now Swami, it was like too much for him. He leaned over her and he whispered to her, "Please, please, shut up, Granny. Don't talk to me, and don't let anyone call me even if the house is on fire. If I don't sleep at once, perhaps I shall die." So this guy was so desperate that all he wanted to do is just shut down all these topics, and he wanted his father to forget about everything, and that could happen only if he just went to bed and pulled the blanket on his face, and he didn't want anybody to wake him up, even if it meant the house was being on fire. Like, he so much wanted to escape this situation. He thought if he didn't sleep immediately, he would surely die. Now imagine how much serious this situation was for him, in a funny way, to just escape from his father's strict command for him to sleep alone. So he turned over again and he curled himself up and he started snoring inside the blanket just to make sure nobody wakes him up. But you know what happened? He found somebody had pulled away his blanket. And you guessed it right, it was his father. So his father came and stood over him and he said, "Swami, get up." Then it describes how his father looked to Swami because there was only little light in the passage. There was semi-darkness and he could see only his father's shadow or apparition. Apparition is something like a ghostly thing that you see of a person, only the boundary. And this apparition was coming by a cone of light that was hung on the wall. So Swami stirred and groaned as if in sleep. He was pretending he was asleep, and stirred and groan are the adjectives to describe how he badly wanted to show his father he was in sleep, and that is the reason he didn't want to wake up. But father said, "Get up, Swami." And Granny, who was watching all this, she told his father, "Why do you disturb him?" Because the poor boy was sleeping and she couldn't see his father trying to wake him up so desperately. Now father was getting really anxious, and for the third time in a row he said, "Get up, Swami." And then Swami got up. Then father rolled up his bed. Then he took it under his arm and he said, "Come with me." Now Swami didn't want to go with his dad, so he just looked at his grandmother once, and he hesitated for a moment to go, but he had no other choice but to follow his father into his office room. And it says, on the way he threw a look of appeal at his mother. That means he looked at her as if he was trying to plead to her that he didn't like all of this. And so his mother said, "Why do you take him to the office room? He can sleep in the hall, I think." Now even his mother, she wanted to support him, so she at least wanted him to sleep in the hall. But father said, "I don't think so." He was bent upon in making his son sleep in his office room, so as to test his courage. And so Swami slunk behind his father with a bowed head. Now slunk means to move very quietly and very secretly. Now again Swami started pleading his father to at least let him sleep in the hall. He had lots of excuses to sleep in the hall. He said that his father's office room was very dusty and there could even be scorpions behind his law books. But father was adamant. "There are no scorpions, little fellow. Sleep on the bench if you like," he told him. Swami asked, could he at least have a lamp burning in his room? But father said no, because he wanted his son to learn to not be afraid of the darkness. It was only a question of a habit, and this was the right time for his son to cultivate good habits. Then Swami asked his father if at least he could leave the door open. Fortunately, his father agreed to that. He said, "All right," but he had to promise his father that he wouldn't roll up his bed and go back to his grandmother's side in the night. And if he did something like that, then his father said he's going to make him the laughing stock of his school, which means he would literally ridicule him in front of all his schoolmates. Now Swami was sleeping alone in his father's room, so that's what Swami felt cut off from humanity refers to. He was pained and he was angry, and he just did not like as to how cruel his father was and how cruel his nature was. And of course, he just hated the newspaper for having printed this tiger story. And he even wished that the tiger had not spared the boy. And again, he thought he was not a boy because he had fought the tiger. And only a monster could fight the tiger. Okay, now Swami is sleeping in his father's office room. And now as the night advanced, which means as the night kept happening, it became more and more silent. Then his heart started beating faster. Then Swami started to remember the stories of all the devils and the ghosts that he had heard in his life. He began to think about how often his chum Mani, the chum is a good friend, and it's an informal way of saying, especially among the kids. So he recalled how often his friend Mani, how he had seen the devil in the banyan tree at the end of the street. And he also remembered about poor Munisami's father, who had spat out blood because the devil that was near the river's edge, he had slapped Munisami's cheek when that guy was returning home at late night. And this way he began to have all kinds of thoughts. and he was faint with fear, which means he was very scared. Then there was a ray of light that was coming from the street lamp, and it was coming into the house, and it cast shadows on the wall. And since it was very silent in the night and everything was so still, he heard all kinds of noises like the ticking of the clock, then the rustle of the trees because of the wind, then the snoring sounds of whoever was sleeping, and also some vague night insects that were humming. Here, vague means something that was unclear because the noises were very unclear and uncertain. He was so scared that he covered himself up completely, and it was so suffocating that he was not able to breathe. So each and every moment he had this expectation that the devils would come up and take him away. And he remembered the instance of his old friend who was in the fourth class, and this guy had suddenly disappeared, and he was said to have been carried off by a ghost to Siam or Nepal. And Swami couldn't contain his fear, so he got up hurriedly and he took out his bed and he put it and spread the bed under the bench, and he crouched in there. Crouched means to lower the body very close to the ground. Then he closed his eyes and pulled up the blanket over himself once again, and without his own knowledge, he somehow fell asleep. But still, when he was sleeping, he was having these really scary nightmares. He was imagining it felt like a tiger was chasing him and his feet were stuck to the ground, and when he desperately was trying to escape, since his feet were to the ground, he just couldn't get his feet to move, and the tiger was at his back, and he could hear the tiger's claws scratch the ground, and the noise was coming, scratch, scratch, and then there was a loud thud. That's a loud noise of somebody falling down. Now Swami tried to open his eyes, but his eyes couldn't open, and so he continued experiencing his nightmares. And these nightmares never seemed to end, they threatened to continue forever. Swami groaned in despair. That is, groaning is to make uncomfortable noises, and despair is having lost all hope. And somehow, with great deal of difficulty, he made a really good effort and he opened his eyes. Now, every day he would sleep next to his grandmother, so that was his habit, and he still thought he was sleeping next to his grandmother, so he put out his hand to feel his grandmother sleeping by the side of him, but he couldn't hold anything. It was just the wooden leg of the bench. And now he realized yet again that he was all alone, and he was sweating and he was scared. But now he could hear some rustling sound, something like a moving sound. So he moved to the edge of the bench and he started staring into the darkness. And there he saw something was kind of moving over there. And he just lay there and he was gazing in horror at what was happening. He was thinking it was the end of him. Then it felt to him that the devil, wherever it was presently, it would, as of now, just pull him out, tear him. And he thought, anyway, this is going to happen, so why should I wait? So as it came nearer, Swami himself crawled out from the under the bench, and he hugged the devil with as much force as he could, and he began using his teeth like a mortal weapon. Mortal weapon means a deadly weapon, to attack whatever was there in front of him. Then he heard an agonized, that is, agony is somebody being in pain. So he heard that kind of a pain and thundering cry. And somebody said, "Ayo, something has bitten me." Then suddenly there was a heavy tumbling and falling amidst the furniture. So that means somebody was there. And whoever that somebody was tripping amongst all the furniture. And hearing all this commotion, just in that moment, Swami's father, then his cook, then the servant of the house, they all came in carrying a light with them. And then they all knew it was a burglar, and all three of them, they fell on the burglar as this burglar was laying amidst the furniture, and he had a bleeding ankle because Swami had bitten his ankle. And as expected, the very next day, there were congratulations being showered on Swami. Now all of his classmates looked at him with so much of respect, and his teachers patted his back. Then even the headmaster had very nice words for Swami, and he described himself as a true scout. Actually, what was happened was that Swami the previous night had bitten into the flesh of one of the most notorious housebreakers of the district, and the police were looking for him, and they were so grateful to Swami for having caught him. The inspector told Swami as to why he couldn't join the police when Swami was all grown up. Swami wanted to be polite, and he said certainly yes, just because the police asked him. But actually, he already had made up his mind either to be an engine driver, a railway guard, or a bus conductor later in life when he grew up. Then later, when Swami's father returned home from the club that night, his father asked his wife, "Where's the boy?" She said, "He's asleep." Father was taken back. Already? He couldn't believe his son was asleep already. But Swami's mother said, "Yeah, he didn't have a wink of sleep the whole of last night. Swami hadn't slept well the last night because of all these incidents." Then father asked as to where was Swami sleeping. And Swami's mother said casually, "In his usual place." And she said Swami went to bed at 7:30. Then father said, "Sleeping beside his granny again? No wonder he wanted to be asleep before I could return home. Clever boy." Now Swami's mother was really mad at him. She had lost her temper, and she let out on her husband. "You let him sleep where he likes. You needn't risk his life again." She was really scared as to something like this would happen again. So she just wanted her husband to leave the son alone. Then father mumbled as he went in to change. Then he said to her, "All right, mollycoddle and spoil him as much as you like. Only don't blame me afterwards." The mollycoddle is caring for a child so much that the child becomes so dependent on the father or mother, and he or she doesn't learn anything in life. But the thing is, Swami was listening to this conversation the whole time from under the blanket, and he felt very relieved and very happy to hear that his father was not so adamant anymore, and that he allowed him to sleep wherever he wants eventually.